Hello and welcome to the Leadership and Culture Bite. I'm Dr. Simeon Roger, and this is where we talk about how superbly trained visionary leaders can create rapid innovation, killer teams, and the organization everybody wants to join. Today, as you've seen in the title, what we're talking about is crisis leadership and a very special dimension of crisis leadership, which is how can you extricate yourself from a terrible situation after events have taken on a life of their own, after events have taken on a life of their own that you did not anticipate. And this is the good for you whether you're the instigator of this mess or whether you're the victim of this mess. It doesn't matter. Now, we're watching all this play out right now, actually, on the world stage. It's incredible to watch because Vladimir Putin is in exactly this situation right now. He desperately needs a way out. His offensive has stalled. As of the time of this video, day 15 of his invasion of Ukraine, his offensive has stalled. He has huge and unsustainable military losses. His economy is in a shambles. And yet he's doing what every Soviet leader would do: when in doubt, resort to more brute force, without realizing that he has very little more brute force he can usefully apply, as we talked about in another video. Now, this is not the first time a Russian leader has been in a morass of his own making. You may remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev decides unilaterally, without really even consulting his colleagues, that the Soviet Union will deploy intermediate and medium range nuclear tipped missiles in Cuba pointed at the United States. Now, what Khrushchev didn't anticipate was the American response. He did not anticipate the United States would simply blockade Cuba. That put him in an unsustainable position. He did not anticipate this, and he desperately needed a way out. Now, Putin is in kind of the same mess because he didn't anticipate that his army would be incompetent, that they would occupy almost no territory. They'd be 2 weeks in and have only one Ukrainian city in hand, and not even that. He didn't anticipate any of this. He didn't anticipate the Ukrainians would fight to the death. He didn't anticipate that the West would be united, that the West would level absolutely crippling sanctions against him. He didn't anticipate any of it. Desperately needs a way out. So how to get out and make this work? When you're in over your head, you need a way out. Now, Khrushchev was actually, despite his erratic character, he was smart enough to realize that he needed a way out. So what did he do? He did actually the smartest thing he could possibly have done. He established direct back-channel communications with the American president. So direct back-channel communications with his adversary. Back-channel because you cannot negotiate your way out of a mess in the limelight of the press. It can't be done. So he reached out to a wartime buddy of his, a KGB agent named Alexander Fomin, who was posted in the US. And Fomin reached out to an American journalist, buddy of his, and said, "We have to meet right now." At a cafe, they met, and Fomin said, "This has gone far enough. It is time for sane people to find a way out." And that was the beginning of the resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis that narrowly averted a Third World War. So what you have to realize, too, is that in order to find a solution that's going to work, both sides have to not only establish back-channel communications, but they have to arrive at a solution where both sides can save face. Both the perpetrator and the victim need to save face. Now, the West was keenly aware of this in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they left and actually worked at finding Khrushchev a way out, which he took. So a way to save face internally for Khrushchev in the Soviet Union with his colleagues and with the population, he was able to do that. Now, the West right now is also keenly aware of the necessity of doing this with Putin, and we see it in many people's commentaries, many expert commentaries from both political scientists and military people saying, we don't want to back Putin into a corner. We want to leave him a way out. Of course, the only person who still seems oblivious to the necessity of doing this is Putin himself. But until he does realize that, there's very little we can do, very little the West can do. Now, we have seen in the last couple of days, Putin has dropped his demand for regime change in Ukraine, which may be an indication he's getting desperate. He may have lost all confidence in his army's ability to take the Ukrainian capital of Kiev, and he should have by now. So we'll see where that goes. The next consideration for a leader like this, like Khrushchev or like Putin, is what happens to you after you have screwed up big time. Well, if Putin is any student of Russian history, then he'll realize that Khrushchev only lasted 2 more years in power, and then he was overthrown by his own colleagues, who had become tired of his erratic behavior both at home and abroad. All of his colleagues, everybody who was anybody in the Soviet Union wanted him gone. They wanted a more stable regime. That included all of the armed forces, that included the government, and that included state security. So what Khrushchev had done was he had accidentally alienated all of his key power bases. Putin may have done the same thing, of course. Oligarchs have been stripped of their wealth, the army is embarrassed, his KGB or FSB buddies who keep him in power, they may be having second thoughts too. So we'll see how that goes. And we're not here to speculate on that right now. This is all about what to do if you're ever in a mess of monstrous proportions. And this can happen not only among nation states, it happens in the commercial world as well. It happens between organizations, between corporations, between governments. It happens everywhere. So if you find yourself on either side of a monstrous mess like this, a mess of monstrous proportions, you need to keep a certain number of things in mind. First, the absolute necessity of establishing direct back-channel communications with the other party. Incredibly important. Second, the necessity of getting whatever professional help you need negotiating this. People who are not emotionally involved. You want really good negotiating skills to be in there dealing with this. And then third, you have to remember both sides need a way out that saves face. So you may have to put some work into, even if you're the victim, you may have to do the uncomfortable and try to find a way out that saves face for the other side. This is how de-escalation works. It's just the way it is. So remember this if you're ever in a mess of monstrous proportions. That's it for now. I'm Dr. Simeon Roger, and thanks for joining us. Be sure to keep an eye out for more content, by the way, from our team on how you can become a world-class leader, build an extraordinary organizational culture and the organization everybody wants to join. We'll see you next time. That's it for now. Take care.